Hello everyone, welcome to another Artist Loft drawing class. I'm your instructor Adrienne Hodge and I'm excited about this class tonight on, it's a reflective surface study using a light bulb as a reference image. And yeah, we've got a nice crowd tonight. I'm excited to see so many familiar faces and new folks. I'll go ahead and switch to my tabletop view. Okay, so don't forget to tag your work that you make tonight. Hopefully you'll have a nice product by the end of the hour. And if not, maybe if you keep working on it after class, you can post it online or share it directly with me. I'm at Adrienne Hodge Art on Instagram, and tag your work with Make It With Michaels or Michaels Classes. And you can even tag me in the work in the post so that I will be sure to see it. And then here's just a couple of my business cards with some of my personal artwork, which I will be referencing a bit tonight since we're using the white on toned paper. I do a lot of white on various tones using primarily calligraphy ink. And here's some other places that you can find me online. Let me try to get rid of that glare. Oh, it's not going away. Well, I'm on Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art. My email is adriennehodge@gmail.com. You can check out all the other stuff I've got going on. And our lovely moderator, Chanel, said she will drop my link tree in the chat for you. That's where you can find me. So we're going to be using black paper tonight. And on the supply list, I had the Strathmore black mixed media paper. And then we're using the Artist Loft. We've got the pencils, sketching pencils, a synthetic eraser, and then these really fun metallic and fluorescent colored pencils. So we've got colors like gold and silver and like this fluorescent or shimmery purple and greens, and then some more fluorescent colors like this neon orange and pink, etc. And we're going to be using a lot of those colors on the black paper. And then the star supply of the night was the Artist Loft Opaque marker. And I had it on my desk last week at the end of class, but unfortunately I took it home with me and I do not have it. So I'm going to go a little off script tonight, and I'm going to use what I use in my personal work, which is, and you can get this at Michael's, it is Winsor & Newton white calligraphy ink. And I'm going to be using that and a paintbrush. And I've just got some of the ink poured out right here for myself. And I've got an Artist Loft paintbrush that I'll be using. But hopefully you have the Artist Loft white opaque marker that was on the supply list. It's wonderful. I love it. And I used it for this example. And I just don't happen to have it with me at the moment. So I'm going to use that white ink with a paintbrush, which will actually be a more, if you wanted to happen to have those things and wanted to do the same thing that I'll be doing, it will be more challenging. The white marker or a white jelly roll pen would be perfect. And that is also hilarious to me because I have probably 20 white jelly roll pens in the pouch that contains the Artist Loft white marker that is not with me. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I'll just be using it like a pen. I'll be using that paintbrush like a pen with the white when I get to that part. And then this was the reference photo that I included on the supply list. It is a photograph of a light bulb on black paper. So that will make it very easy to translate to the black paper because we're not going to have to imagine the background too much. The black paper is literally going to act as the black paper in the photograph. So that is helpful and fun, and hopefully you printed out that photo or you've got it handy. If not, you can snap a photo of this one. I'll keep it on the screen for just a moment if anybody needs to do that. So I'll be referencing that image, and I don't know that I'll be able to have the reference on screen at the same time. And then one thing that wasn't on the supply list, just a piece of scratch paper to do a little bit of sketching, because I'm just going to outline some tips about reflective surfaces before we lay it down on the black paper, just so that you can see my preliminary lines on white paper first. So any questions about supplies? Hopefully I'm not throwing anybody too off with the fact that I'm not going to be using the white marker, unfortunately.
We had one question. Kara asked, would white gouache work? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh, gouache. Yeah, white gouache would be perfect. If you've got white gouache and a paintbrush. So yeah, actually, I guess it is helpful that I'm not using that white pen. But yeah, a white jelly roll pen, or even I've got one of these also. I debated on using it, but it's not it's a white brush pen if you happen to have something like that. Those can sometimes be problematic for me because it's hard to control how much of that white ink spills out at once. Sometimes you squeeze it and it all comes out in a bubble. So I prefer just a little palette of ink and a paintbrush. But yeah, ideally you would have a white pen. that Artist Loft white marker is really great too, because it's a felt tip pen and it's very easy to control. Okay, so just dive in right in here. I'm gonna grab my sketch paper and my reference image, and I'm just gonna outline and talk a little bit about reflective surfaces. So we had a premium class back in, I think, September or October. I think it was our very first premium class, and there weren't a whole lot of attendees to it. But you know, if you sign up for the premium classes, only the people who registered get those recordings, whereas these free classes are on YouTube the next day for you to watch the playback. But in that reflective surfaces class, we went over a lot of the things that I'm going to cover very briefly tonight. And the reason that this class, being a step-by-step little tutorial here, is going to be a little bit easier to walk through than that premium class on reflective surfaces, because we're using the black paper, and the black paper really cuts out a lot of the legwork for us in terms of making the optical illusion of a reflective surface come to life. And before I forget, while I'm on the topic of premium classes, it's going to be a little commercial here for our premium class next week. It is January 26th. 1 week from tonight, we've got the Artist Loft Tips and Tricks for Drawing Eyes. And so that's a premium class. And like I said, if you know, you're not able to attend the class, then you will, but you sign up and you pay the small fee for the premium class, you'll be sent the recording so you can watch it later. But it's not going to be posted on YouTube for everyone to see, like these free classes. So you can register where you registered for this class under the online classes and events on the Michaels website. The premium classes are just listed in the same feed as the free classes. So next week's class is the premium class on drawing eyes, and I'm excited. So yeah, make sure you register for that one now. It's a very affordable class. It looks like Chanel just dropped it in the chat there. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, you can just go to the Michaels website under online classes and find the class on January 26th called Tips and Tricks for Drawing Eyes. Okay, so I'm just using a 2B pencil here to sketch, mostly so that you can see my lines. If you want to use a lighter pencil so that it's easier for you to erase, you can. I'm just using a darker pencil so that my lines will show up a little easier. So I'm just going to outline the contours and the value shapes. If you have been sticking with me since the beginning of this series, you're going to, and you've been coming every week, you've probably noticed that I talk a lot about contour lines and value shapes. So the form that we're drawing here of this light bulb is mostly a sphere. So we're going to start out with a sphere, and then we've got a little funnel shape, cylindrical funnel shape right there. And then another cylindrical shape for the base of the light bulb. So that's our basic shape. And if before we add the contours, this might look kind of like a tennis racket, right? It could appear very flat. But the way that we make this appear three-dimensional is we think about the contour line. So if I were to take a thread or a piece of yarn or something and wrap it around this light bulb, it's going to be curved in order to wrap around it. So we want curved lines. So we're just sketching to get an understanding of the contour lines here. So on the vertical axis, we've got curved lines there. And then on the horizontal axis, we've got curved lines. But since we're facing the horizontal axis a little bit here, at some point, some of this may appear straight. And then on the other side of that equator line where it's facing us, the curve is going to go in the opposite direction. So that is important because all of the value shapes, all of the light and dark that is falling across this form are following those curves. So this highlight right here, this shape of this highlight is following this curved line. So we want the shape of that highlight to also be curved. So when I put that on, I need to make sure it's following that curved line. If I were to put that highlight on flat, then it would be confusing to the viewer. It would, wouldn't read as being round in that regard. So all of these highlighted shapes, all of these shapes of light that we're seeing are following these same curves. So it's nice to outline those and do it kind of like the Epcot Center golf ball or whatever you want to think of it as, and then think about those highlights falling across in terms of the curve. So even these little dots right here, see they're following the curve of the vertical axis as we drew it there. So that goes for the darker shadows. So they also need to follow that curve. And most of these darker shadows, we're not even going to have to worry about on this black paper because we just leave them alone. We're going to draw around them and let the black paper act as our absolute blacks. And there's really not a whole lot of absolute black in this photograph, which is kind of a tricky thing to observe because the light bulb is sitting on black paper because of the light source that I had when I took the photograph, the only places where we're going to leave the black paper alone are going to be in the darkest part of the shadow here on this little part on the base of the light bulb, this organic shadow that we're seeing falling across the table. So we're just mapping out all of the value shapes right now. So these are the areas that we're going to leave absolute black. This is where we're not going to do anything to that black paper. Just going to put a diagonal line through it. So this is the leave it alone zone. And if you were to use a different reference photo that had a lot more absolute black, then it would be, a lot more or a lot less drawing on the paper. So I'm just outlining all the absolute black shapes right here. Those aren't quite absolute black, but I went ahead and made them that way. And I also made them curve around that base. But we do have some things, you know, that are going down the length here. So on a cylinder, it's not rounded all the way around the form. On a cylinder, we've got a curve at the top or the bottom, and then we've got some straight lines on the side axis there. So you might have straight contours, but then curved on this axis. So on the base of the light bulb there, we're looking at a cylinder. So we've got curved lines here, but then think of it as straight lines traveling that way. And then on this part right here, it's like a funnel. So it's like a vortex. And it also has some straight lines in the middle, and then they radiate out on the sides, and then a curved contour line like that. And then within that shape, we've got all kinds of stuff going on here. The deeper we look into these reflections, then we kind of have to, stay with me here, we have to think about this axis on this side because we're seeing through it, right? So we've got this, it really is like a vortex right here. We're seeing this action. So within this, we've got a lot going on inside of the light bulb, but we don't really need to worry about that too much tonight for this step-by-step drawing, because I'm going to walk you through when I get to that part. I just want you to be aware of the fact that we could add a lot more here. And if you're working with a different reflective surface that's not this reference image, you might have a lot more reflected in the surface. You might be seeing the shadow of yourself leaning over it if you were working from a still life item right in front of you, and that shape, that blobby shape of what's being reflected could change as you move. If you shift in your seat, you might be noticing that the reflections are changing because it's reflecting you. Or if the light out of your window changes, like you've got a setting sun in the room, then you might have a really bright, reflective light, like a window shape reflecting on the light bulb, or, whatever reflective object you're looking at. And then if the sun's going down, then that would disappear. So just be aware that, a lot of those shapes of light and dark that you're seeing are based on what's going on in the room around you. Like I took this photo in my old studio, and I can see like the pictures that were hanging on the wall right there, or all these lights, these little dots is because I had this really lovely hanging light fixture with a bunch of Edison bulbs that were hanging down over the table. So that's what you're seeing is the underside of that really cool light fixture. And you're probably seeing my reflection right there, etc. So, but when it comes to drawing this on the black paper, we can leave a lot to the imagination. I'm just pointing that out so that you'll be able to pick apart what all those shapes might be or why they might change if you're drawing from a still life item from life. Okay, and then the next important thing I want to point out is this big part of the shadow of the light bulb, because it starts in the middle of the light bulb and then kind of radiates out like this. And it does have a little bit of light in it, so it starts out pretty dark inside right here. This might be a leave it alone zone like this, but we are going to add some light in the middle of it. So I think those are the biggest highlights and shadows and contour lines that I wanted to talk about. I could probably spend all day just analyzing this reflective surface, but any questions before I move on to sketching it on the black paper?
We haven't had any other questions.
Okay, great. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my black paper, and I'm gonna just dive right in with one of these fluorescent pencils as my, just take this off. Okay, so I'm going to begin sketching using one of my fluorescent pencils rather than my my H or B pencils. And that's just, again, so that you can see my lines. If you feel more comfortable sketching, you know, something like this on your black paper first in graphite, just try to sketch really lightly so that your lines are easy to erase, and don't get too, you know, dug into the paper. I'm gonna use one of these, one of the lighter colors, probably, let's see, we're gonna end up using almost all of them. How about this green? This green, the metallic green. I used a lot of it because I was seeing a lot of metallic green in this image. So you can see there's a lot of this metallic green throughout my final sketch here. Okay, I actually turn my paper horizontal. I did make a little box on this paper if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to grab a ruler and float a little box. I mostly did that just because I realized how much I was coloring the background, and I wanted to just like stop at a certain point and not go all the way to the edge of the paper. But yeah, I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm just going to start drawing in the middle of the page and not worry about that so much. It'll be more of a vignette here. So I'm just using the green pencil, the green metallic out of this Artist Loft metallic and fluorescent set. I was going to show you guys the box that they came in, but I seem to have tossed it across the desk over here. I saw somebody was asking more specifically what the pencils were. It's the Artist Loft metallic and fluorescent pencils. You could use other colored pencils on this black paper, you know, pretty much, or you could use chalk pastel is always nice on black paper, would be a nice substitute. I really just thought it would be fun to play with these for a reflective surface. So I've got the round shape of the light bulb. I didn't quite draw my light bulb on the same tilt here. It's kind of on a tilt like this. So I'm thinking about this diagonal line, how it's resting. And the first layer of lines that you put down, even with one of these colored pencils, doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to put so many layers on this, it should be easy to cover up any preliminary lines here. If you're doing this in with your H pencil, it should be, I don't know how visible it will be, but it'll be easy to cover up is my point. Okay, but yeah, if you wanted to like sketch in some of those contour lines like we did when we were just outlining it, mapping it out a moment ago, you certainly can. Okay, I'm gonna switch between a few different colors as I go. Let me go ahead and put these all the big shadows in there first. So we've got this big shadow we talked about. And just make sure that we're capturing the gesture of the light bulb and how its weight and how it's leaning. Now is the time to try to make that happen. And then I've got this.
Adrian, we did get one question from Robert. He does not have the black paper and white graphite, and he's wondering if you have any suggestions on how he can mimic the class effect.
Using what? Tell me the supplies again.
So he said he does not have the black paper and white graphite. He didn't mention what he does have.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, if you're just using white paper, then you're just gonna do the opposite. So, you know, I talked about in my sketch here that the leave it alone zone is the black. So if you're using white paper with colored pencils or whatever your supplies are, then you're going to leave the white zones alone, which is going to be all the places that I'm going to put the white ink. So these highlights, those will be the shapes that you outline and leave blank, and then you'll be adding your colors. Same as we are pretty much, except for you're going to be adding that black nice and heavy in regards to those dark shadows, whereas I'm going to be leaving the dark areas alone.
Thank you.
Okay. Good question. Yeah, you're just going to have to use your brain to do the opposite of what I'm saying in terms of the light and dark. Okay, so I'm on the shadow here. And then I'm just designating all those places that I'm going to leave alone. So I kind of sketched a little bit into this area right here when I was sketching, but that's going to be one of the darker moments. So I'm just going to erase my lines there. And you can use black on black paper. Like if you accidentally draw into something that was supposed to be left alone, you can always, use some black charcoal or something to make it dark again if the, erasing it out isn't quite doing the trick, or a black pen. All right. So I think I've outlined all of the major shadows. Now I want to outline all of the major highlights. I'm just going to use my yellow since it's nice and bright. You could also maybe use the silver. I think the yellow will show up more for you guys. And I'm just going to outline everywhere that's going to end up being my absolute white highlights, where I'm going to add the ink. And you can color those in as much as you want, because that opaque white marker is opaque, meaning it will cover, it is not see-through, and it will cover up a lot of things. So the white ink that I'll be using will do the same thing. It will be opaque and we won't be able to see through it unless I thin it out, but I'm going to try to use it very direct, like a pen, since the supply was for a pen. The recommended supply was the pen tonight. All right, so these are not quite absolute white highlights, but they're still pretty white. I'm basically just sketching all these little highlighted shapes that I'm seeing here. And I didn't put that much detail in my other example here. I left it a little ambiguous, which I love to do. So you make it as detailed as you want. I always have to say, especially when we're doing kind of a step-by-step follow along class like tonight, please do not, I know it's really hard not to, and because I have a problem not doing it as well, but try not to compare your product so far or at the end to mine or to anybody else's in the class. We're all at different stages in our practice, and it takes a lot of practice to get things to happen exactly, to close that gap in our mind of what we want something to look like and what actually comes out of our supplies, our pencils. So just embrace whatever is happening. The cool thing about these supplies we're using tonight is we're going to have something that's very vibrant and contrasting and you know, kind of popping off of the page no matter what, just because we're using a lot of white on black and we're using these metallic colors on black. Like it's gonna look cool no matter what, especially when we get that white on there. Okay, so I've outlined all my major highlights and lowlights and shadows. So now I'm ready to start filling in the midtones. So I'm gonna go back to that green color because yeah, I'm seeing a lot of green. If you've got the printout of this photo, then you can see what I mean. I don't know how much it's showing up on screen, but there really is a green tint to it. I think because probably what was around me in the room when I took the photograph was reflecting a lot of pink and a lot of green. So I'm going to do kind of a scribble technique, a cross between a scribble and a hatching line technique. I'm just going to start filling in all this background area using a variety of colors. So I'm going to use the green first. I'm going to use this metallic purple. I'm going to use a lot of them. And then the fluorescent pink and maybe the fluorescent orange. Oh, and the blue. I see I used a lot of the blue before. So I'm going to use those 5 colors. And I'm just going to start laying down this this mid-tone. So I'm turning my pencil on its side and I'm holding it sort of like I would a paintbrush when I'm filling in a large area, and I'm just using a big diagonal line, just trying to fill in as much as I can all around my leave it alone zones and all around my light bulb right now too, just to start to create some contrast, because we want the black to stand out separate from the color just as much as we want the white to stand out separate from the color. So I'm going to have to move my paper around a little bit because I'm left-handed and I've got something blocking my hand a little bit tonight over there. So I'm going to kind of just turn my paper on its side so that I can get that big movement that I need with my hand to fill in that area. So I'm a big fan of a diagonal line to fill in, a diagonal hatching line to fill in large areas quickly. But you could also use kind of a scribbling technique as well. Whatever you want to do to get it done. We're going to do a few different layers of this with a few different colors. And I'll admit I probably took my time. It's always so hard when I'm making these examples to keep in mind that I only have an hour for the class, you know, because I'm sitting at my desk on a Sunday afternoon drawing a light bulb, and I get a little dreamy when I'm drawing sometimes. So I probably went a little slower than I am right now on this example. But so if you're going as fast as me, try to, you know, think about your craftsmanship. Keep it unified. I'm gonna try not to go too crazy here. Now I'm using the blue. I'm mostly just starting with the background first, just because I think it's gonna help us see the final product a little faster. If you're watching the YouTube video recording of this later, you know, you can choose your own adventure here if you wanted to, you know, come back to the background and like fast forward to the part where I get to the meat and potatoes of the light bulb. Okay, so I use the green and the blue. Use some purple. And by the way, we're going to put these colors in the light bulb too, because whatever's happening around the room in a reflective surface study is going to be happening on the reflective surface too. Just like the water is always going, a body of water is always going to reflect colors in the sky or the surroundings. I'm filling in this little pocket right here with these colors, but I'm leaving my leave it alone zones alone. Did purple, but I forgot green and blue right here. And actually, while I'm at it, let me go ahead and get the light that's coming into this middle shadow here, because it's kind of radiating down in the middle like a comet. Seeing a lot of that purple in the photograph as well, radiating out there. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of this pink and orange in the background, and then we'll start working on the light bulb. Mostly I just didn't want to get too sucked into the light bulb and then realize I hadn't concentrated on the background. These last 20 minutes of class always go by pretty fast.
Mary asked if oil pastels work the same.
Yeah, oil pastels on black paper could be nice too. They are not going to work exactly the same as far as blending goes, but they will certainly make contrast on black paper, and we'll have some nice vibrant colors for sure. I would advise using, yeah, the same sort of like a hatching line as you're applying oil pastels. Chalk pastels, you can definitely blend them a little more like the colored pencils are blending together. Okay, so filled in most of that background. Now I'm going to start to get that mid-tone going inside of the light bulb. And like I said, you could always start with this and then come back to the background. Either way, we want to try to make it feel unified. So the area of the light bulb where I'm seeing the colors of the paper coming through the most are sort of this big swarthy area right here. Try not to go inside of the areas that I'm leaving black or that I want to be white. But I want this sense of seeing the surface that the light bulb is sitting on through the light bulb. So we want that to feel connected. So we want to use those same colors, just maybe not quite as loosey-goosey as I did that background, just being more mindful to stick to the area where the mid-tone is coming through the most. And then I'm going right up against where the black shadow, because I definitely want that black shadow to pop. And it's really going to pop when I start using like the pink next to it. So maybe I'll press a little harder with the pink. You could also go in make your lines, apply your lines in terms of the contours as well. So if it's starting to feel a little flat, start to round some of those lines so that you get a sense of the roundness of the bulb inside of there. Okay, that's pretty good. I have not used the silver yet. Let me get the silver going. So I used a lot of the silver in my other example. I used it right here, and the gold as well. So kind of right at the edge where the black is really going a little more direct. So I'm pressing down on the pencil a little more to make that contrast start to happen. I'm still using a hatching line to blend into the background. But right there at the edge, I'm starting to create more of a contrast. And the silver also works really well to blend into the background colors and start to make it feel like the light, like how the light glows a little bit right here. So just pressing down a little harder on those edges where you're trying to make a little bit of a glow happen around to separate the light bulb from the black paper that it's sitting on, the surface, the table surface, from the reflective surface. Make that separation happen. Okay, same thing here. So I'm still using a hatching line, but I'm just pressing down a little harder at the edge of the light bulb to make that glow happen. And same thing with some of these mid-tones that I'm seeing inside of the light bulb around the edges of the curves. In some moments I'm pressing down a little harder, following the curves of the bulb. And I'm being very selective about where I'm adding these colors. Like you don't want to go overboard too much with any one color because then you're going to lose the effect that having that color in just, you know, a few swatches around the bulb is going to create. If I were to just color that silver all the way around, then it's not going to have that same effect because then it's going to feel all silver, right? Okay. But it's very easy to overdo it with a color like that you're like, ooh, this looks great. Same thing with the white. Once we get in here with the white, it's going to make a really cool effect happen, but you have to be careful not to overdo it. Otherwise you take away the novelty of that effect that you're creating by putting it everywhere, right? It's like I used to have a friend who said every day was the best day ever. And I'm like, is it though? Because you said yesterday was the best day ever. If every day is the best day ever, is any day ever the best day? You got to spread those novelty things around. Otherwise, they lose their magic. Okay. Where else did I want to put the silver? I think that was it. And then maybe since it is such a nice little pop, we'll do a few lines like this. And I have had my fair share of teaching at paint and sip establishments over the years. And this is the sort of thing I would do in a paint and sip class. I would tell everybody to just take the silver and do like 4 lines right there and then stop. You know, I wouldn't talk about why or how to you know, what the effect I'm creating with that, everybody would just follow that step. So do that, do a few little lines that'll make a cool thing happen. And then we'll do the same thing with the gold. If you have these supplies, I know a lot of people are working with different supplies tonight, but and then this gold doesn't quite create that coppery brass color that we're looking for there. You really want to blend more of an orange with the white right here. So maybe the fluorescent orange, if you're trying to make the gold create that brassy feeling, it's not going to do it quite as much as combination of yellow and orange will. And like I said, I'm going for more of an ambiguous, you know, stylized version of this light bulb. So I'm not really worried about absolute accuracy. All right, wow, it's getting up to 10 till, so I guess I better add this white. I'm kind of waiting since I'm using liquid ink to add it. If you are, you know, using chalk pastel or that a white pen, gel pen, or any type of white pen, you could definitely start to bring the white in whenever you're ready. I just want to see what I want to add before I do that. So maybe a little more gold. And do the same thing I did with the silver, where the paper is sort of glowing. And you can obviously put as many layers on this background as you want to try to make that glow happen throughout the background. I love how I said don't go overboard with it, and then I just took it and just did a big a whole bunch of it right there. I'm just trying to create a little more contrast here at the top of the bulb. It's all about, the contrast is always going to be created by, you know, dueling forces. So you can't just, you know, expect one side of those dueling forces to do all the work. Like the white is definitely going to make a lot of contrast on the black, but we need the midtones to also help with the contrast, because the darker I make the midtones, the more I'm going to make the black stand out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some white. So this will be much easier to do. I feel like being like, don't try this at home. No, try this at home for sure. But this was not in the plan tonight. The plan was to just get in there with that opaque marker and do it really quickly. But I'm taking some of my my white ink here on a fine paintbrush, and I'm just putting in. You're going to take your white pen or your white and follow the curve and fill in those highlights, and then it's really going to start to pop. Looking at my photograph and seeing this big white area right here. At some point, I am going to have a class that focuses on brush pens. I've been planning that for a while, just haven't done it yet. But using a brush pen and drawing with a paintbrush, which is something I do a lot of in my personal work. So like when I flashed my business cards, I do a lot of stuff like this where I draw with a paintbrush on a dark surface, and that's kind of my jam. So I know I'm probably making this look super easy, getting a nice fine line to happen. This will be much easier to do with a marker or a pen. But I'm just being aware of my pressure on the paintbrush. If you are trying what I'm doing at home, if you didn't have a white pen but you did have some white acrylic paint or some white gouache, like somebody mentioned, you could do this with a paintbrush. You just want to practice going really lightly with your pressure and being very mindful. A paintbrush is like a sponge. If you fill up a sponge with soap and water and you press it down on a table, all the soap and water is going to come out. If you just barely touch that sponge, just a little bit is going to come out, right? So it's all about the pressure that you're putting on the paintbrush to make a thin line happen like that. With a pen, you're just drawing with it. Filling in those reflective dots, that light fixture that was reflected there. And then if you've got the pen, you can do a little bit of like some hatching lines using less pressure. I'm going to do it with my paintbrush. It's probably going to come out a little darker, but this would be very easy to do with the pen. You'll just, make a nice thin little hatching line happen so that it's not quite as white as the brightest moment of reflective light. And then that way the brightest light will stand out against it. Okay. And then there was the little insides of the light bulb that I drew. Sort of sketchy like this with the white. And you can put as many details in there as you want, but I prefer to leave it a little loose and leave it to the imagination. And if anybody is interested, I have an independent class coming up that I'm teaching on my own, not affiliated with Michael's, at the end of the month. You can find it through my link tree on my online shop where it says shop and register for classes. It's called Drawing and Painting Clouds, since that is what I do a lot of in my personal work. And in that class, I'll give away all my secrets to how I draw these ambiguous things, these ethereal things, in a way that makes the viewer see clouds when really all I'm doing is a few very neat tricks with various types of whites on different tones, so that and I'm going to do it with black on white paper too. So I'll show you. It's drawing and painting clouds. I'm going to show you how to draw and paint clouds in a variety of ways. But everything we're doing right now with this light bulb to create this effect is very much, it's an optical illusion. I mean, any type of drawing is an optical illusion. You're making the viewer see something on the page, especially if it's something that's sort of realistic and three-dimensional like this light bulb or the reflective surface. But we're not putting all of the information there. We're leaving a lot of it to the viewer to connect the dots. And so it's all about making specific choices in how you're creating that optical illusion. So for this, it's just those highlights, that in conjunction with the midtones that we created with the metallic colors, and then that black paper, all create that optical illusion together. All right. So are there any questions about how I added the white or where, or anything like that? You'll definitely, you want to kind of pause if you've got a lot of white on there, like stop and think about where you're putting it, because it can be really easy to, you know, also go overboard with that, just like with anything else. If you put the white everywhere, then you're going to lose the effect. So I advise, like, you know, put the white on just so you can kind of see the magic that will happen with it, and then go back to your metallic colors and continue building up your layers so that they kind of ease the transition from the black to white. And like anywhere that you're looking at the photograph and the photo is really popping with, you know, a glow or a contrast, and you're not seeing that in your drawing yet, that's where that silver can really help make those transitional moments happen. Like right here, the transition between the bulb and the paper and the shadow, that's a moment where I really want to focus that silver so that it makes that little pop happen. Like, you know, if you leave it kind of blurry there, that edge can really make such a difference, just emphasizing that edge. Also, there's a really cool thing that happens with reflective surfaces where sometimes you'll see this white line, um, and then you'll see like a black line next to it. It almost feels like the edge of the light bulb is suspended in space right there. Like, I'm going to get really close so you can see it. And that can be tricky to make it happen. And rather than making that happen with the white, I did it with kind of a little bit of the white and then the green and the silver. So I implied it right there, because if I put the white, then the white is going to be that like opaque white. It's not going to, um, and it's not quite as solid white. That little magical edge that's happening, it's not as brilliant white as this. So if I used my opaque marker or jelly roll pen or my white ink right here, it's gonna kind of lose the magic that would happen if I do it with the silver. See what I mean? So try something like that around an edge. If it's feeling kind of blah around any of your edges, you can create a little magic moment like that. All right, well, I'd love to see some of y'all's examples. We've got about a minute here. Chanel, can we spotlight some people in the crowd and see their light bulb drawings?
Yes.
Also, right after the class ends, I'm going to do an Instagram live for 30 minutes, do a little Q&A on this topic. Oh, that's lovely. Yes. See, yeah, just that, when you get that white going, it just pops, even if you still got to finish your mid-tone layers. I'm seeing it. Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh, those lines are so clean. I love it. Oh, very nice. Yeah, I'm glad somebody did do it the other way with color on white paper. That's great. So lovely. Oh, I hope you guys will post these online and tag me so that I can maybe share them. Very nice. Oh, I love how you built up the layers in the background, and the quality of your lines is really fun. There's a lot of movement. Oh, look how delicate that is. Really nice. Oh, is that gray toned paper? Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, that would work wonderfully as well. All right. Well, yeah, if anybody has any lingering questions, I'm gonna hop on my Instagram live for, oh, look at that one. More clean lines. Very nice. Oh yeah, and that little moment where that area of between the shadow and your light bulb is really jumping out.
hold on one second. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once.
Okay.
Okay, so Elle Fig says she has 2 questions, and I just need you to type them in the chat so we can ask them.
Okay. We are out of time, so if you wanted to join me on Instagram in just a moment, I'm going to do a Q&A for 30 minutes. And if anybody's watching the YouTube later and wants to see the Q&A, it will just be on my Instagram as well at Adrienne Hodge Art under my IGTV. I save them every night. So, but if you want to type them in the chat, we can try to answer them right now real quick as well.
He said, first, what white pencil did you use for the spots?
I used the white ink, so you would use the white marker or a white pen or white chalk pastel, anything like that would work for the whitest whites.
Then she asked, why can we not see the green that you're using in the beginning of this drawing?
Probably just because of just the light on my desk. Maybe it wasn't showing up a whole lot, but I was using that metallic green. It also kind of blends in a lot once I start layering those other colors. So it might have been a little hard to see.
Yeah, I saw the green too. I could tell it was blended into other things, but I could see the green.
Yeah.
And then we have one more question. Let me find it really quick.
Yeah.
Of the colored pencils set, which colors did you use?
So I was using these metallic and fluorescent colors, although I know some of the colored pencil set, the Artist Loft colored pencil set does come with the metallic gold and silver, but I'm not sure that it comes with all these other metallic colors. But I was using the metallic green, the metallic purple. I used the gold, the silver. I used some of that yellow, and I used the fluorescent orange, the fluorescent pink, this fluorescent red, yellow, and I also used this blue, although I don't know how metallic that blue is, but I guess it is. Yeah, on the page it is metallic blue. I used almost all of them. Oh, there is metallic blue and then there's a regular blue.
Yeah, there is. It does look like you almost used all of them.
I did. Yeah. Now that I'm like putting them all in my hand, I'm like the 12-piece set that I had here, and that is almost all 12 of them. So yeah, I did use almost all of them, but I think I used mostly those, the metallic colors the most, but that fluorescent pink and orange definitely, I used a lot as well.
Okay, that was the last question. So I'm just going to throw your link tree in here one more time because I know you said you have your Instagram live that you do afterwards. That way, anyone who wants to join can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I'll be there in just a few moments. If anybody has any other questions, and then yeah, next week, hopefully you guys will join me for that premium online class on drawing eyes. That should be a lot of fun. So you'll just go to my Instagram and then click on my profile picture where it'll be lit up because I'm live. And then if you miss it, it will just be on my Instagram page later under the IGTV tab. All right, well, thank you everyone for another lovely class. I really enjoyed seeing all of your drawings, and I'll see you next time.